manifested here can be seen by the public. So, in order to start the session, I welcome Uttara. Uttara, Uttara, you are not audible. Can you unmute your mic?
Okay, I'm sorry. A very
No
fine good
problem.
evening to all the participants here in this webinar. Myself, Uttara, second year LLB student, Ma Gregorius College of Law. Before we commence with the webinar, I would like to bring into the attention of all the participants that make sure all your mics are muted and none of you get engaged in any kind of presentations while the webinar is on for the smooth conduct of this webinar. We have all successfully came over our first session knowing and understanding the basics of arbitration through our previous webinar and introduction to arbitration. Today, we are all here to have our second session, Arbitration Process, a General Overview, conducted by LJRF in association with Cochin Institute of International Arbitration. I now invite Ms. Amina, an enthusiastic law student, to officially welcome us all to this webinar.
Thank you, Uttara. A very warm good evening to one and all. I would like to convey my gratitude to Law and Justice Research Foundation, LGRF Trivandrum Chapter, and Cochin Institute of International Arbitration, collaborating and conducting this special webinar on topic arbitration process, a general overview. I'm blessed to have an opportunity to welcome you all. As we have a key speaker today, Mr. Veeraraghu Imbavijayan sir. He is a commercial arbitrator and mediator, both domestic and international, and he is also a member of ICCA Hague. I must tell that Imbavijayan sir holds numerous precedents and achievements by his own. We are extremely pleased to have you here, sir. I welcome you. I would like to move ahead with the responsibility of welcoming Advocate Johnson Gomez, sir. He is a director of Cochin Institute of International Arbitration, and we all are familiar with him because of the former session on the topic arbitration. I welcome you, sir. Next, I welcome the most warm person of our LGRF Trivandrum chapter, Mr. Safi Mohan, sir. Without him, this cannot be possible. I kindly welcome you, sir. Now, I'm welcoming Sri Lakshmi, second year LLB student and a volunteer from LGRF Kottayam chapter to this special webinar. Next, I welcome Neelima V. Nair and Advocate Sunita S., the wonderful coordinators of this extreme special session. Last but not the least, diligent members and volunteers of LGRF, the kind participants, I'm extremely overwhelmed to welcome you all. Thank you and have an informative session ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. It was indeed a pleasant welcome. Before we officially start off with our webinar, it would be indeed a valued one to hear a few words from our participant, a brief review about our previous session, and introduction to arbitration. For that, I welcome Ms. Sri Lakshmi, an inquisitive second-year LLB student from Government Law College Trivandrum, and also a member of LJRF Kottayam chapter. I welcome you, Sri Lakshmi.
Thank you. Good evening to all. Today, I am delivered with the duty of giving a brief summary of the previous session, which was taken by Advocate Johnson Gomez sir and Sir Dr. Marisport A. So coming to that point, India is the fastest developing world. Also, in relation to that, there are a lot of disputes arising with regard to various aspects, which becomes factors for such development in various fields in internationally also. The delay in judicial remedies and the high expenses are also a great social concern, and it will also affect the ease of doing business, etc. The alternative dispute resolution methods are now widely accepted and have been gaining recognition at the national as well as international level. So in the previous session on Introduction to Arbitration Laws, which vividly expressed or gave a detailed critical and analytical approach on how to enforce a foreign arbitral award and about the unsettled model law, its territorial application and implications. We firstly discussed about what is arbitration and the types of arbitration. As we all know, arbitration is a formal private dispute resolution mechanism and it is defined in Section 2(f) of Arbitration Conciliation Act. It is classified as domestic arbitration international arbitration, institutional arbitration, and ad hoc arbitration. Then about the distinction between arbitration and litigation. Here, in arbitration, we know that the parties are able to select the arbitrator, but in litigation, such a process is not possible. The arbitral proceedings and award are being private, the confidentiality is protected. But in litigation, the documents and judgment are available for public scrutiny. Then about the New York Convention, which is acting as a precedent in relation to the arbitration laws. The New York Convention on the enforcement of foreign arbitral awards, an award made in one convention state, which can be enforced in any of other 146 convention states. Then about the unsettled model law was the foundation of all national laws. But in litigation process, the enforcement of the judgment possible only if there is a reciprocal arrangement with the foreign country, and laws of different countries will be different. Some may be common law countries and the others may be civil law countries. Then about the general principles of arbitration, which is specifically mentioned in sections 12, 13, in Schedule 5, 6, and 7 of Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996, which includes three general principles. They are fair resolution of disputes by an impartial arbitrator without unnecessary delay or expenses. Second one, party autonomy, meaning the party should be free to agree how their disputes are resolved. And third one, which mentioned in section 29A, that is the time limit for arbitral award and provision for avoiding unnecessary expenses. And section 24 reporting to the case management protocols, etc. Then the grounds on which appeal under section 37 of the Arbitration Conciliation Act is provided or implemented. The session further moved in relation to the arbitral process and case management, also institutionalization of arbitration, and how the arbitrators are appointed, its procedures, and other essentials which formulate the same. Finally, discussed about the Arbitration Conciliation Amendment Act 2019. It features provided for Constitution of Arbitration Council of India for granting institutions and arbitrators. Then qualifications of an arbitrator is by included Schedule 8. The other one main point is that the Supreme Court and High Court shall have the power or authorized to designate the arbitral institutions from time to time which have been graded by the Council. The training and research in the field of arbitration, it is of great significance in the present era, and further spoken about its various perspectives regarding Indian aspects and legal principles and in respect of processes concerned with the implementation of foreign arbitral award. In conclusion, it is a spirit of law and not its form which keeps justice alive. The concept of conflict management has found a new tool in the form of alternative dispute mechanism techniques like the arbitration, mediation, conciliation, negotiation, and log adalats. The ADR mechanism is a much expeditious and cost-effective process of justice dispensation as compared to litigation. The concept of rule of law given by Dicey implies supremacy of law and equality before law. This concept of rule of law is imbibed in Article 14 of the Constitution, which guarantees equal protection of laws and protection against arbitrariness to each and every citizen of the country. Also, due to expansive interpretation of Article 21, that is, no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law, in various judicial precedents, Article 21 also includes right to free legal aid and a speedy trial. Even Article 39A, one of the directive principles of state policy, ensures that it is the responsibility of the state to provide equal opportunity to attain justice by specifically providing free legal aid. Legal aid is regarded in various forms and at various stages for seeking guidance through courts and tribunals or through ADR techniques. Therefore, ADR mechanisms help achieve the objective of Article 39A, introduced by the 42nd Amendment to the Constitution, of providing free legal aid to all citizens so that justice is not denied by the reason of economic or any other. It usually takes far less time to reach a final decision than if the matter were go to a trial. Furthermore, in the case of arbitration, the parties have far more flexibility in choosing what rules will be applied to their dispute. They can choose to apply relevant industry standards, domestic law, the law of a foreign country, a unique set of rules used by the arbitration service or even religious law in some cases. The parties can also have their dispute arbitrated or mediated by a person who is an expert in the relevant field. And one of the major advantages of the Act is it minimizes the intervention of the role of the courts and is a method of resolving disputes outside of court whereby an arbitrator employed by the parties will listen to the arguments of the parties, review the evidence, issue a decision that is generally final and binding on the parties. Dispute resolution resolves the conflicts that occur amongst individuals or organizations. In turn, the judicial burden is reduced. The constitutional force behind ADR mechanism and the major authority of ADR, that is the Legal Services Authority, and the speedy justice, respecting in particular the specific human rights, are significant parts of the same. And the Indian law of arbitration is contained in the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. The Act is based on the 1985 Unsettled Model Law on International Commercial Arbitration and the Unsettled Arbitration Rules 1976. India has in place a modern and efficient arbitration act. Yes, there have been some decisions which are not in tune with the letter or spirit of the act. Hopefully, this would be addressed by the judiciary in the near future, and continuing popularity of the arbitrators would be served by a truly efficient ADR mechanism, which will be in good conscience, just, fair, and in reasonable manner. So this is about the factors which we discussed in the previous session about introduction of arbitration law by Johnson Gomez sir and Sir Harris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sri Lakshmi. I hope her words made us really recall what we have learned in our previous session. Thank you so much, Sri Lakshmi, for your kind words. So today we have with us our most respected speaker, Sri Veera Raghavan Impa Vijayan, an expertise in the field of arbitration, and also Advocate Johnson Gomez, who is familiar face to us through the previous session. I wholeheartedly welcome you both to this webinar, and I invite Sri Johnson Gomez to proceed with the sessions.
Thank you, Uttara. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. But I have a little disagreement with what was presented as if that we have discussed last time, because we have not discussed about ADR mechanism, or we are not interested in any judgments. We have not discussed about 2019 amendment. We have not discussed a lot many things. Now, moving forward, I think that next week also we will have another session. But we are looking forward for what we call once we make a review, to be perfectly based on what was stated in the presentation. To give a recap, since Sri Lakshmi has mentioned about many things, I think that it is necessary for us to take this forward from a perspective, because we are working on a module that would be helpful for you. We have just talked about one concept, that is the general principles of arbitration. This general principles of arbitration is nowhere stated in the Arbitration Conciliation Act of 1996. We have been discussing about this concept, which is contained in section 1 of the Arbitration Act 1996 of England. And we were trying to explore whether the general principles as contained in the English law is available in Indian Act. So we have been discussing only 3 principles. We are not looking forward for studying more. We will not appreciate a student who studies more. We are expecting a study of just what is being discussed, and we are not looking for a broad type of a study. We have discussed the first principle as The arbitration is a process where there is a fair resolution of dispute by an impartial arbitrator without unnecessary delay or expenses. And we said that section 12, 13, schedule 5 and schedule 5, 6, 7 of the Arbitration Conciliation Act has this concept of impartial arbitrator resolving a dispute. And the second principle that we have discussed is about party autonomy. I think that today also we will be talking about this concept in a large way. And we mentioned a few sections in which we find this party autonomy is present. Party autonomy, while you read Arbitration Conciliation Act, we will find that many of the provisions starts with a particular type of words that if the parties do not otherwise agree. That means a lot of weight is given to the parties' autonomy. So only if the parties do not have an agreement, this provision would apply. And we have discussed about the third principle, and that is limited court interference. In order to highlight this, we have attempted to say that there are a few provisions only under which the courts can intervene. So let us make the broad understandings. We did not discuss anything more than that. We have just discussed about three principles. And I wish that these principles needs to be studied with reference to the provisions that are available. I think that today also when Imba Vijayan sir discusses, I think that you will get better understanding. So we are not going to the other branches of conciliation. We are not interested in discussing the judgments of the Supreme Court on this or anything. We are just on a very basic concepts, and it is therefore that I wanted to intervene and say that we did not discuss any of the things which were mentioned by Sri Lakshmi. We are not looking for studying more than what is being discussed. Let us study only what is discussed in these presentations, and we will go deeper into it as and when we move forward. That will be the concept that we will be following. And I would today therefore invite Mr. Imba Vijayan Veeraraghavan, who is a very known arbitrator, and he is a good teacher as well. Therefore, he will be able to put things in perspective for you. Let us travel in in a guided manner as is presented by so I invite him for making his presentation on a general overview, and he will also be able to give you a proper picture as to how arbitration works in the field. After his presentation, we will go for an interactive session with him, and then we will go for question and answers. And so that we will try to conclude it within 1.5 hours as we have planned. So I request Mr. Imba for making his presentation, then we'll go for an interactive session.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Hope I am audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
First of all, happy Diwali to all. It was interesting when Mr. Johnson asked me just on 14th, even though being a very prominent day wherein Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was born, it was quite decent to understand that this, since being a Diwali, and literally I am enjoying Diwali in my native village. Fine. Coming to the sessions, I was very happy to hear a lot of information from one of our students, Sri Lakshmi, that coming to the recent amendment also. And it was fine that Mr. Johnson also clarified what happened in the last session. Before going into the actual arbitration process, we have to very cautiously think upon a recent development. Hardly a week back, there was an interesting development in an arbitration. An ordinance was brought in, Arbitration Ordinance 2020, wherein the 8th schedule, which was proposed in 2019, has been omitted. It has been literally omitted. You need not go into the 8th schedule, which was brought in 2018. I'll just explain later. Since being some recent development, I wanted to highlight it initially. Okay. Thank you. First of all, thanks for CIIA and Mr. Johnson, along with LJRF, giving this opportunity to share about arbitration process, particularly an overview about it. It's an interesting subject. As Mr. Johnson was rightly pointing out, we are not confining and going into this other ADR mechanism. And one thing we have to be very clear before going into the understanding of these arbitration process. In India, where we are following the common law system, arbitration is not technically included in ADR. Please keep this in mind. We are not a civil law jurisdiction. Only in a civil law jurisdiction like Swiss, China, US, and some continental European countries, where the civil law system is followed, they have ADR in a larger scale. Alternate dispute resolution covers arbitration also, but in common law system, it is very clear that arbitration is not included. Why? Because arbitration is still considered to be a quasi-judicial process. It has a lot of role of courts. I think when Sri Lakshmi was mentioning about the activities of the courts, particularly she was mentioning about section 2(1)(e), where the court has been defined. There is some role of court, some effective role of court, which is facilitating this arbitration process. And not only that, post-arbitration also the court has some role. If there is a role of court, obviously in common law jurisdiction, it can't be considered as an ADR mechanism. But all along, for the past 2 decades, we have been traveling that ADR includes arbitration, and particularly that has been clearly mentioned in section 89 of CPC. I think most of the students would be familiar on section 89 of CPC, wherein it is clearly mentioned that when the court prefers that or finds that there is an element of settlement, the civil suit, a pending civil suit, can be referred to any of these ADR mechanism, and there they have tried to include arbitration. That is why in India now, as a practice, as a customary practice, we are also bringing in arbitration within ADR. That is one small introduction I wanted to give pertaining to ADR. Coming to my topic, arbitration process. Many would be quite happy to see that arbitration is the best mechanism, and arbitration is the mechanism wherein the parties' autonomy is predominantly considered. And finally, it is a process where there is a limited intervention of courts. Party autonomy and court intervention to a minimal level, that is the thumb rule of arbitration. That is, we have to accept that, no doubt. It is very clear that these 2 principles are literally followed in arbitration. And if you just look into the Arbitration Act, the Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996, wherein the particularly part 1, which deals with predominantly arbitration happening in India, it is very clearly given that in most of the provision, the parties can agree. The word unless otherwise agreed by the parties, it starts with it. Major provision. I think if we can have literally a count on it, it will be more than 27 or 28 provisions. The word unless otherwise agreed by the parties itself shows that the party autonomy is a prime principle in arbitration. And this principle is obviously facilitating the concept of flexible procedure. Arbitration process is flexible procedure, no doubt. It doesn't mean that it is totally without procedure. It has some procedure, but those procedures are flexible. Not only that, it is also party driven. The parties are agreeing for such a procedure or process. For illustration, the first aspect in the process, in any dispute, there should be a judge, a person to decide. When it comes to arbitration, under the arbitration process, we have to nominate an arbitrator. Nominating an arbitrator, it is seems to be very simple. I think we have a couple of senior people are there, like Assistant Professor Safi Mohan, Mr. Johnson Gomez are there. Can you just appoint Mr. Safi Mohan or Mr. Johnson as arbitrator? Looking into the law and looking into the process, it seems to be very simple. The law says that any person of any nationality can be appointed as an arbitrator. Secondly, it also brings in, when you look, I think in the last session, you had an understanding of 12, 13, along with 5th to 7th schedule. Any person can be appointed as an arbitrator, assuming that Mr. Safi Mohan is appointed as an arbitrator by the parties. Whether it is a smooth ride for them to continue as an arbitrator? No. It is not so easy. The original Principal Act of 1996, the words given in 1996 Act clearly shows that it seems to be simple. But the 2015 amendment, which was from effect from 23rd October 2015, brought in some development wherein the internationally proclaimed soft law, I think if students are very interested, you can note down this very interesting soft law. It is called the IBA Guidelines on Conflict of Interest for international arbitrators. This soft law has been brought in as a mandatory provision under the Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996. That is all about 5th schedule and 7th schedule. It is simple. 5th schedule goes for 34 categories. Out of that, first 19 is taken in 7th schedule, which prohibits a person to act as an arbitrator. All these is a creature of that soft law, IBA Guidelines on Conflict of Interest. Assuming that Mr. Safi Mohan, considering the flexible process, is being appointed as an arbitrator. Initially, or at the time of accepting that appointment, Mr. Safi Mohan is going to give a declaration, a disclosure. Now it has become mandatory that he has to give in writing. Looking into the 34 categories, whether Mr. Safi Mohan can continue, he can continue. There is high possibility. But a prospective arbitrator, at the time of accepting that appointment, he has to give the declaration. He is very clear. He is not coming within that purview of the 34. Now, he is accepting that appointment. This disclosure doesn't end the initial stage also. It also continues till Mr. Safi Mohan completes that arbitration, gives the arbitral award. At some point of time, there might some relationship develop in the perspective of the categories given in the 5th schedule. He gives a declaration, the subsequent hearings. Can he just continue? Still he can continue. There is a possibility of bias, but ultimately if he gives a declaration and that declaration comes under first 19, 1 to 19 of 5th schedule, which is being captured by 7th schedule, then Mr. Safi Mohan cannot continue as an arbitrator. The process of appointing an arbitrator seems to be very simple. The party has the autonomy, both the parties have the autonomy, and ultimately after appointment, there is a lot of issues, lot of impediments for that arbitrator to continue. This is a recent development, no doubt, and worst development was 2019 8th schedule. Fortunately, now it has been omitted. But if you look on 2019 8th schedule, it is clearly mentioning that that person, that arbitrator should have 10 years experience as an advocate or as a chartered accountant or as a company secretary or as an engineer or a specialized person in telecommunication or labor industry, whatever might be. 10 years experience with some exposure in arbitration and basic understanding of the Constitution of India. So much of complication was there in the 8th schedule. Just for appointing an arbitrator, if you look on section 11, which speaks about any person can be an arbitrator or appointed as an arbitrator, or default, if the High Court appoints a person to be an arbitrator, there is a lot of issues arising at the time of appointment or at the time of accepting the appointment, during the process, till giving the award. Various impediments are there for that arbitrator to continue, even though we say the process is flexible and less cumbersome. Now, when an arbitrator is to be appointed, the party autonomy, I think I'll take the lead from Mr. Johnson, what he mentioned about party autonomy and court intervention. As party autonomy, it is very clear that the parties can agree and ask even one of them to appoint an arbitrator. There are two parties. You can say Sri Lakshmi and Uttara are two parties in a dispute. They have the right to appoint. If we give that party autonomy and the two of you are given the opportunity to appoint an arbitrator, can you just expect a consensus, a mutual consent to appoint an arbitrator? It is impossible. As a litigating parties, we can't just expect that the two disputing parties agree and appoint an arbitrator. That mutuality is it's very remote when it comes to after the dispute has arisen. That is the reason why in most of the cases, most of the arbitration clauses or the arbitration agreement, you can see that one party would be considered as an appointing authority, and that party would be given an authority under the party's autonomy to nominate an arbitrator. This was very, very prudent example in arbitration process, particularly the party autonomy. Recently, the intervention of court by a judgment, a Supreme Court judgment the last year, predominantly brought in a new theory saying that an interested party should not appoint the arbitrator. It was a public sector undertaking arbitration wherein the Supreme Court ultimately intervened and gave a well-settled principle that interested parties should not appoint an arbitrator. Not only that, the representative of that interested party should not sit as an arbitrator. Now comes the major problem. The intervention of court post-arbitration also now has created a challenging point for the arbitral process. If one party appoints an arbitrator and the arbitration clause also facilitates that, still the court has a different perspective and ultimately such an appointment cannot be accepted. Even if a process continues with one party appointing an arbitrator based on the arbitration clause, that arbitrator continuing and giving the award, that award can be easily set aside because of the public policy of this country. The public policy of this country, by way of a judgment, a Supreme Court judgment, has categorically mentioned that an interested party cannot appoint an arbitrator. Now, the party autonomy is now in a challenging situation. We say that we have the right, but still there is a challenging position now. But still, we have to confine with arbitration. Why? Because this arbitration process doesn't only confine with party autonomy. Party autonomy in appointing arbitrator is a small portion. Party autonomy in various aspects in the arbitration process are still effectively utilized and effectively enforced. What are those? There are concept called cost. There is concept called time. There is concept called the normal procedures. There is a concept called the enforcement. All these concepts are also considered to be other advantages of arbitration. The party autonomy gives the arbitrator and as well as the parties, if they want to mutually agree, to fix the procedure. I think the procedures, what is applicable in the courts, you all can easily answer that it is the civil procedure code. The same in a criminal matter, it is a criminal procedure code. But when it comes to arbitration, what code is there? What procedural code is there? As a party autonomy, the law itself facilitates, when you have a good understanding of section 19(19), it clearly mentions that the arbitrator has an option to neglect the civil procedure code as well as the Indian Evidence Act. All would be happy, whether the parties, the disputing parties, or the representative of the parties, or even the arbitrator, as well as the society at large. We need not, or the arbitrators need not follow the principles of the Civil Procedure Code as well as the Indian Evidence Act. This party autonomy is categorically, mandatorily given in the statutory provision under 19. That means the arbitrator and the parties can agree on any procedure or any process. If such a provision is there, an arbitrator can also complete the arbitration within a day. All would be happy. The disputing parties would be the happiest person. But arbitrators like me, Mr. Johnson, as well as the future arbitrator, Mr. Safi, would won't accept this easily, having one-day arbitration. One-day mediation is possible. One-day conciliation is possible. One-day Lok Adalat is possible. Not even one day. 10 minutes Lok Adalat is possible. But arbitration also is possible if you look on particularly the section 19 when it comes to arbitration procedure. But still, arbitration procedure, even though it is not following the Civil Procedure Code or the applicability of Indian Evidence Act, still the arbitrator should complete that arbitration by giving an award with reasons. The fag end of the arbitration is writing the award. While writing the award, the arbitrator cannot write an award as simply that this is a claim, the claim is accepted, the award is in favor of the claimant. We can't just stop like that. As arbitrators, if you are given a permission, one day is comfortable. You can hear the parties for 8 hours. We can read the books for 2 hours, write the award within 5 minutes. The law doesn't permit that. That is why I mentioned that it is not an ADR process. It is still a process which is quasi-judicial. The expectation of law is that an arbitrator has to complete that arbitration, give the award with reasons. Writing reasons for issues is quite a complicated one. It takes some time. That time is needed for the arbitral tribunal to complete that arbitration process by giving the award. One-day arbitration is not possible. That is the reason why the law has given that initially in 1996, there was no time frame for the arbitration to complete. In 2015 and the 2019 amendments, there was a time frame brought in wherein the arbitration has to be completed within 12 months. Arbitration process, according to 2015, it has to be completed within 12 months from the date of reference. When you look on the 2019 amendment, when you're getting back, looking into the documents, the 29A of the Arbitration Conciliation Amendment 2015 gives 12 months from the date of reference, but it has been slightly modified in 2019 by inclusion of a particular provision in 20 3, they have included a time frame for completion of pleadings. The parties have to complete the pleadings within 6 months from the date when the letter of appointment was given or the constitution of the arbitral tribunal. 6 months from that period, and from after completion of pleadings, from that period we have 12 months. 6 plus 12, 18 months. All these are law has mandated. Try to complete the arbitration within 6 plus 12, 18 months. And further, mutually the parties can agree for extension another 6 months. 6, 12, 6. 18 plus 6, 24 months now has been given for domestic arbitration and not for international. International arbitration now it is relaxed. The law gives an option for party autonomy and ultimately gives a time frame. If a time frame is being given, obviously the party autonomy has gone. The intervention of courts is quite high when it comes to the 2015 and 2019 amendment. The spirit of arbitration of the 1996, as rightly Sri Lakshmi was pointing out, the ancestral model law 1985, which was a basis for our arbitration constitution 1996, has been slightly been removed by 2015 and 2019 amendment. But no doubt there is an upper cap. Please keep in mind the arbitration process has to be completed within that 24 months. That is far, far, far better. If you look on the statistics of some arbitration, arbitration is not only confined with private parties like us. Arbitration can involve the government, the federal government, the central government. It can involve the state government. It can involve the public sector enterprises. It can involve the state entities. All can be parties to an arbitration. Commercial arbitration can include even the government. If all these are parties in an arbitration, there is a possibility of prolonging that process. The freedom given to the parties and the arbitrators quite earlier, the earlier stages of arbitration, the 1996, 2000, now has been a challenge because no arbitrators or arbitral tribunal are in a position to complete an arbitration within a reasonable time. The arbitration process and the arbitration saying that the time, it's an expeditious process. We are keeping on saying that arbitration is an expeditious process. And I just mentioned that time is another factor of advantage of arbitration, has been slightly diluted from 1996 till 2015. That is the reason why there is an upper cap given now. Try to complete within 12 months after completion of pleadings. An arbitral tribunal has 12 months to complete and write the award. Now it is easy, and the pleadings has to be completed within 6 months. This is all facilitating that process. The change in law has now facilitated the completion of the arbitration within a reasonable time. Otherwise, we had to even wait for 4 to 5 years to complete an arbitration. All would be very anxious. Okay, now we have placed the arbitration clause in our contract. When a dispute comes, we can complete that arbitration process at the earliest point. It is not so easy now. When you actually get involved in an arbitration, the arbitration process would be challenged in various stages. No doubt it won't stop the arbitration process, but still there will be a lot of challenging stages in the arbitration. As Mr. Johnson would have mentioned earlier, the earlier session, that 12 and 13 is a challenging aspect of the qualities of the arbitrator. Then there will be jurisdictional challenge, 16. Then there will be obviously a lot of challenges based on these precedents, the judicial precedents. And as an arbitrator now, an arbitrator has an option to give a lot of interim measures. In the arbitration process, the arbitrator also can give some interim orders. So much of authority is given to an arbitrator. Ultimately, if an arbitrator giving some orders, those orders also subject to appeal. All these, when we just actually start an arbitration, we will encounter. While encountering all these challenges, there is possibility of delaying this process. There will be some possibility of appeals. There will be some possibilities of increasing in cost. All these are some of the outcome of the original Act of 1996, which has been tried to be made to a minimal level by 2015 and 2019 amendment, to some extent, not to the maximum extent. Getting back to the time factor, arbitration can be completed now within this 24 months. The process is very clear. Now, what are the major ingredients in the process? What will happen in the arbitration? Just appointing an arbitrator is enough? It is not like that. We have to appoint the arbitrator. Once the arbitrator is appointed, he has to find a place to conduct the arbitration. Where will that person do the arbitration? We need oral hearings. If you are happy that we need only hearings based on the documents, that means we need not have an oral hearing, then there is an option given. We can go for fast track procedure. Very interesting development. Fast track procedure. Section 29 capital B gives an option for the arbitral tribunal to complete with the arbitration within 6 months. Look into the document. If necessary, you can have oral hearings. Otherwise, we need not have oral hearings. But 99% of the arbitration in India, we need to have oral hearings. It is always advisable that it is better to have an arbitration with oral hearings. Oral hearings are required for clarifications, for testimony of evidence, for oral submissions, as well as closing submission. All these we need to have. It's better to have oral hearing. Don't go with fast track procedure. The law permits. We can do an arbitration within 6 months, get an arbitration award. It will be comfortable, but it is better to have oral hearings and a normal arbitration process. Forget about fast track procedure. You can have a normal arbitration. Normal arbitration, what process follows after the appointment of an arbitrator? The place. As the arbitration clause says that, assuming that the place, I think Mr. Safi Mohan would be happy to have the arbitration in Thiruvananthapuram. In Thiruvananthapuram is a good place. We can have an arbitration. In Thiruvananthapuram, we don't have an high court. Keep that in mind. We don't have an high court. High court is in Ernakulam. If we have some parties who are quite interested to always approach the courts before even commencing the arbitration, that party might be interested to approach the court to get some interim relief. If you look on section 9, which speaks about interim relief by the court, it starts before appointing the arbitrator, before even commencement of the arbitration process. If you are going to approach a court in Thiruvananthapuram, we have only the principal civil court. We don't have a high court. Even if we have a high court, that high court doesn't have an original site jurisdiction. If we go to the courts to get some interim relief, there itself some reasonable time would be taken for the parties to get some interim relief. Okay, fine. We are happy with Thiruvananthapuram. The principal civil court is very conducive and they are very comfortable and they are also facilitating the arbitration process. But in Thiruvananthapuram, we have to have the arbitration physical, the oral hearings in Thiruvananthapuram. Where to do? We don't have CIIA. CIIA has some facilities, a secretariat, they will provide some place. Administrative assistance would be given for that arbitration. If you permit Mr. Safi Mohan to conduct his arbitration, the comfortable place for him is to have the arbitration in GLC Trivandrum. In GLC Trivandrum, if he conducts an arbitration, whether it is permissible, whether the parties would accept, no doubt, if I am party, I will accept. But still, the party's expectation would be whether that place or the venue in Thiruvananthapuram is a neutral place. Along with that, that neutral place should also facilitate the concept called administrative assistance. That place should also provide some secretarial assistance. In GLC Trivandrum, if he sits and conducts the arbitration, first of all, he should have some facilities, some arbitration facilities, and that facility should also make that proceedings to be in camera. Another advantage of arbitration, we keep on saying that it is private and confidential. That means no third person has to participate in the arbitration. The arbitration process is private and confidential. If the arbitrator, Mr. Safi Mohan, conducts the arbitration in GLC Trivandrum, every window there will be 10 to 20 students watching and hearing. Whether we can maintain that confidentiality? Impossible. We can't just maintain that confidentiality. It is impossible to have. Then where to conduct? The next choice, Mr. Safi Mohan would say that my residence. Whether the party would be happy to go to his residence? Fine. If his residence has some exclusive, like an office space, fine. He can do it. But still, we can't just expect him to maintain the private and confidentiality principle. Very hard. There will be some family members who can just interfere in that arbitration. The confidentiality goes. Where he has to conduct? The arbitration process should be conducted in a confidential place, in a neutral place. Where to conduct? Then he has to search for some arbitration institution. That is the reason why predominantly in the arbitration clause itself, the parties would have the choice of whether to go to ad hoc arbitration or whether to go to institutional arbitration. If the parties have agreed in this arbitration and institutional arbitration, the institution has that facility. The institution would provide a neutral place and a neutral hearing venue. Here, unfortunately, Mr. Safi Mohan, as well as the parties, have no support of the institution because it's an ad hoc arbitration. But still, he can approach, or the parties can agree to approach some institution by invoking Section 6. The arbitration process is guided by the law. If you get back to Section 6, which speaks about administrative assistance, it is clearly mentioned that the parties or the arbitral tribunal, with the consent of the parties, can approach an individual or an institution to avail administrative assistance. The option is given in the law itself. Take that option and approach an institution. There might be some institution, there might be some neutral institution. It is not confined that it has to be an ADR or arbitration institution. It can be any institution. If that institution has that facility to provide the secretarial assistance, opt it. Or even an individual can also provide that service, opt it. That way, we can cross that second impediment in that process, finding the seat. Now we found the seat or the venue for the arbitration. Then we have to move on with that arbitration procedure or the process. In courts, we have all the comforts. The registry is there. The registry guides the party by implementing the civil procedure code, and it guides from the initial stage till the completion, and not only that, beyond the completion till enforcement. The court registry would give that support. When it comes to arbitration, where is that support? The institution support, we can get it. But still, if the arbitrator and the parties are not interested, then the arbitrator has to follow that principle categorically in a manner which has been guided by the law. If you look on the law starting from 18 to 31 and further, if you go till 33, it guides the process. That particular chapter starts with the principle of natural justice. I think many would be happy. As law professors, always we will be happy that the principle of natural justice has to be followed. In arbitration also has been given, but not directly, but indirectly by implementing a process called equal treatment of parties. The parties should be treated equally and they have to be given equal opportunity. That's how the process starts. An arbitrator has to treat the parties equally, no doubt. He has to give reasonable opportunity for both the parties, or more than two, all the parties. And once he gives that opportunity, then there is a limited possibility to challenge that arbitral award, which is going to be given by that arbitrator. After that, he is finding a place. After finding the place, he is going to agree on a language. Which language we want to, or we are happy to conduct the arbitration? In courts, no doubt, depending upon the jurisdiction or the hierarchy of the courts, either it can be in the vernacular language or it can be in English. The high courts is in English. But when it comes to arbitration, it is not confined with a particular group of people who knows multiple languages. We can hardly expect a party to know only one language. If you have a domestic arbitration between a party from Kerala and a party from Haryana, and the arbitration is going to happen in Kerala, they can agree any place in India. The expectation of Kerala party would be that arbitrator should be familiar and that arbitrator should conduct that arbitration process in Malayalam. But when it comes to the Haryana party, he can't be comfortable. He has to depend on a translator. And if he is going to depend on a translator, the process won't be fair. He doesn't know about that language. If he is depending on a translator, that translator, if he is an official translator also, there might be some missing factors of conveying some messages. Now, the arbitrator has to agree or has to specifically mention about a language. Both the parties can agree. If they are agreeing for English or both the parties are agreeing for a particular language, fine. They have to manage with that. If they are not agreeing, then the arbitral tribunal has to fix the language. The next stage in the process, fixing the language. If you simply look on section 20, that's the place, and 22, the language, the words are very simple. Unless otherwise agreed, the parties are free to agree, failing which the arbitral tribunal shall fix. If the arbitral tribunal has been given an opportunity to fix the place and language, for a moment we can happily enjoy that Mr. Safi Mohan wants to conduct an arbitration in a resort. He has that authority, he has that power, he can fix that. He'll be the happiest person. He wants to have that arbitration venue in a resort. The parties have to accept. The process becomes very rigid if the parties have not agreed for a particular venue. The language also similar. If the language, a particular language is comfortable for that arbitrator, particularly Mr. Safi Mohan, would say that I need to conduct the arbitration only in Malayalam. If he fix that, then the Haryana party has to arrange for some translator and he has to translate all the documents in Malayalam, and then only the arbitration can be conducted. If the parties are not agreeing specifically, then the arbitral tribunal fix all these. Language is over. After language, in the process, the pleadings. What are the papers to submit? Lawyers like us, we always will be familiar with plaint and written statement. And as students of law also, you will be trained to go for drafting and conveyancing. In drafting, the skill of drafting the plaint as well as the drafting the defense statement and rejoinders, all these are very common. But in arbitration, what is a document? What does the process say? What document has to be produced? There also the law guides. Every stage of the arbitration process, the law guides. The law says that a statement of claim has to be filed and it has to have the content of the facts, the issues, as well as the remedy, what has been sought. It gives a clear picture that the facts has to be put in, then the issues has to be mentioned, and finally the relief, what has to be sought. Or what is a prayer? A simple language is what is a prayer. Similar to plaint, the law also recommends that in the process, while filing the pleading, the statement of claim should have all these. And when it comes to the respondent has to bring a very interesting component of alleging all these what has been given in the statement of claim. Statement of defense has to be submitted. And it doesn't end there. It also gives an option for filing counterclaim. Counterclaim can also be filed by the respondent. It doesn't mean that always the person who is invoking the arbitration, the person who is starting the arbitration alone has a claim. The person who is defending that arbitration claim also might have a claim. That claim might become a counterclaim which arises out of the same contract. And if you look on all these arbitration agreement, very unfortunate term would be mentioned, all disputes shall be referred to arbitration, or any dispute shall be referred to arbitration. Those words have been very clearly drafted. And if such a word is given, then there is a high possibility of counterclaim in every arbitration would be filed. As an arbitrator, the arbitral tribunal has to accept that counterclaim also. No doubt, an arbitrator would be paid additional fees for that counterclaim. The claim, separate fees, counterclaim, additional fees, no doubt. But still, in the process, the pleadings also has been guided by the law by way of statement of claim and statement of defense. It doesn't end there. Then comes the documents. What are the documents has to be submitted? Supporting documents. All documents can be filed along with the statement of claim or statement of defense. And we can also have a reservation of filing additional documents in the later stage. If you have the document, you can submit. If you are not having, we can later submit. This is very common. What's happening in the courts also happens in the arbitration process. The worst scenario comes now. If you consult a lawyer like Mr. Johnson, particularly if you are a respondent in that arbitration, he'll say, don't appear. Don't participate in that arbitration. I don't like Mr. Safi Mohan, who sits as an arbitrator. Don't participate in that arbitration. Don't file any pleadings. Don't file a statement of defense. We have later opportunity. After writing the award, we can challenge that award. There might be some lawyers guiding the parties. Don't participate. In some situation, even without the advice of lawyers, the parties also won't be very serious enough to accept this process. No, this process is happening outside the court. It is happening in some place which is called some institution. We need not participate. The parties also would be in the notion not to participate in that arbitration. As an arbitrator, how to manage, how to conduct that arbitration. There is also a helping hand in the law. No need to worry. Whatever advice is being given to the parties, as an arbitrator, an arbitrator's responsibility is to conduct the hearing, invite the parties, by way of the mechanisms how to communicate given in section 3, communicate to the parties, let the party appear. If the party are not appearing, then the arbiter tribunal can continue with the proceedings and give the award. It is not an ex parte proceeding. It is a proceeding wherein an acceptance of the absence of that party as a, what you can say, a process wherein the parties, if they are not accepting, they are forfeiting their rights to participate, and ultimately the arbitrator can continue with what the documents and what the pleadings has been submitted. He can continue and give the award. No doubt he need not wait. But the only thing is that if the arbitrator is not familiar in all the technicality of the dispute, all the legal nuances of the dispute, all the contractual effect of the implementation of the dispute, the arbitrator can also get the assistance of some expert. In the arbitration process, an arbitrator can also appoint an expert, and that expert can guide the arbitrator to come to a conclusion and give the award. So much of options process is being guided, or the procedure is being guided by the law in the arbitration process. An arbitration process seems to be very simple. You can simply say that an arbitrator has full authority to conduct, but still it is all guided step by step by the law. The law guides the parties, the law guides the arbitrator, the law guides the witnesses, the law guides the consultants, the law guides the stakeholders, and also the law guides the court, where the court has to intervene. There is an abundant role of courts, there is a reasonable role of parties, there is a reasonable authority given to the arbitrator when it comes to arbitral process. The arbitration process is, for a simple understanding, is user friendly. That's all. But still, it is all given by the law. From law, we are taking, even if it's an institutional arbitration, if you are going for CIIA, or if you are going for some institution recommended by LJF, all institutions have its own custom rules. All those rules also has been adopted from the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. No doubt it is very clear. But as an overview of the arbitration process, it is user friendly. It has been properly guided by the law, but it gives an option. It gives an option for the parties to agree on the procedure or the process. If the parties are not categorically agreeing or mutually agreeing or consenting for it, then it ends up in the hands of the arbitrator. If it has been given to the arbitrator, obviously the arbitrator ends up with his own style of conducting that process, but still that process is being guided by the law. Finally, in the process, the only mandatory role given to the arbitrator is the arbitrator has to give the arbitral award. That award can be partial award, that award can be a consent award, or the award on agreed terms. It has to be an award. It has to be a final award, so that there should be a conclusion for that particular process. These are some basic information what I wanted to give as an overview for the arbitration process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation. I have a small question, or in fact, can you give some insight as to how an arbitration process actually commences in the ad hoc arbitration and in the case of a institutional arbitration? And I just wanted to understand as to what is the point of trigger of the commencement, whether it is by issuance of a notice or whether it is the actual date on which the first sitting of the arbitration happens, or what is the trigger moment?
Okay. The triggering moment of the arbitration process. Normally, when we have an agreement or a contract, there might be minimum of two parties. The two parties have their own duties and obligations in a contract, whatever, or an agreement. When one of the party breaches or fails to perform its obligation, we call that particular moment to be the triggering point. Technically, it is called the cause of action, or in a layman person or for a student of law, understanding is that the point wherein the difference arises. Two parties executing a contract or enforcing a contract or an agreement, there will be a disagreement or a difference which arises between them. That difference can obviously be solved mutually by both the parties. They can agree and they can solve it. But if that difference couldn't be solved, that is structured as a conflict or a dispute. Here, there is a very interesting case. I think you can all Google and get it. It is Halki Shipping, Halki, Halki Shipping versus Sofex Oils, Sofex, Sofex Oils, a very famous English court judgment, which gives a definition for the term dispute. For an arbitration to commence, we need to have a dispute. It is not that we need to have a difference or a conflict or a disagreement. We need to have a dispute. That particular difference has to become a dispute, and to understand dispute, we have to understand that particular judgment, Halki Shipping versus Sofex Oil. If the dispute arises between the parties, that is the triggering point, and that point we have to invoke the arbitration. Invoking the arbitration is like normal contracts. If a breach happens, one party wants to take some legal remedy, they are going to issue a lawyer notice. If you approach a lawyer, get the advice of a lawyer, immediately the lawyer would issue a notice wherein there will be a demand. There will be a demand asking for the other party to comply with it. Simple language, a demand and a complaint. The other party would be asked to comply with it. And failing to comply, the party who is invoking the particular clause in a contract, that particular point becomes the date when the cause of action arises for the limitation purpose. In arbitration, as Mr. Johnson was mentioning, ad hoc and institutional, where how to start the arbitration. If it is ad hoc, we need not approach any institution. It is the party-driven process. There is no actual role of an institution. Two parties have a contract. In that contract, a dispute comes. When a dispute arises or a breach happens, the agreed party has to look into the contract, particularly look into the dispute resolution clause, or normally we call the jurisdictional clause. In a normal contract, the jurisdictional clause says that if a dispute arises, approach the court in Thiruvananthapuram. That's all. Alternatively, we have an arbitration clause. The arbitration clause, if it is ad hoc, it says that all disputes shall be referred to arbitration at Thiruvananthapuram. That's all. If it is an institutional arbitration, it will be mentioned all disputes shall be referred to arbitration under the rules of CIIA Kochi. These are three options given. The second option is ad hoc. If it is ad hoc, Once a dispute comes, the aggrieved party would look into this clause, and based on that clause, he will invoke by way of sending a lawyer notice stating that I am invoking that particular ad hoc arbitration clause and I am suggesting so and so as an arbitrator. Depending upon what's the number is mentioned. If the number is not mentioned, the default number is 1. They will appoint that arbitrator. If it is an institutional arbitration, the parties need not worry. If a dispute arises, immediately the aggrieved party can approach the institution, and that institution would take the responsibility and commence the arbitration process. But for all, the commencement of the arbitration proceedings, understanding is simple answer is section 21. The day when the other party receives the notice of invocation of arbitration, that is the date of commencement of arbitration proceeding. But the process is very simple. Send a letter to the other party. If you are an aggrieved party, you are sending another party a letter wherein you are mentioning about this contract. You are mentioning about that I am going to invoke the particular arbitration clause. It might be ad hoc clause or it might be a institutional clause. Either of the clauses, both are acceptable. If it is an institution, that institution guides and it has a template for every process and it guides for a cost. Oh, Mr. Johnson, I have made it clear.
Yes, I have one more clarity that I require. You were mentioning about invoking Section 9 of the Arbitration Conciliation Act for getting interim measures before or after the commencement of the arbitration. And you have now mentioned that Section 21 is the relevant provision where the date of receipt of the notice is the point where we commence. There is an amendment to the Arbitration Conciliation Act in 2015 whereby Section 9(2) has been added. Therein it is said that you will have to commence the arbitration once you get an interim order for interim measures within a period of 45 days or some period has been prescribed. Here, suppose a person 90 days. Am I right?
Yes, 90 days.
Yes. The 90 days. Now the question is, suppose a person has issued a notice and he doesn't take any further steps. He has suggested an arbitrator. There is a dispute regarding the consensus regarding the arbitrator to be appointed. Can he sit simply ever after without taking any further steps and enjoy the fruits of the interim relief?
Now, after the 2015 amendment, particularly inclusion of subsection 2 in section 9, it is
now I think that there is one difficulty may be arising. The difficulty would be in the nature that
Mr. Johnson, you are not audible.
you're breaking, I think.
Yeah, now it's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Section 9, subsection 2, that is specifically mentioning that particularly.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Particularly in 2015 amendment, once an interim order, whether it is granted or refused to be granted, some order has been given by the code under 9. The parties are being given only 90 days to commence. Within the 90 days after that, they have to commence. As Mr. Johnson mentioned that in most of the cases, the parties after getting the interim order would enjoy. They won't commence the arbitration. Assuming that the party is spending more than 90 days and after some 180 days, he is going to start the arbitration. The court There is no clear provision how to deal with that. But still, when an arbitrator is appointed, or the arbitrator is simply already his commencement according to section 21 is the invocation notice wherein a particular arbitrator is suggested or he's been appointed. Constitution of the arbitral tribunal is happening. The arbitral tribunal can wait for a reasonable time to accept or get that statement of claim. If the statement of claim is not filed after getting a section 9 application, they have to proceed. The statement of claim is not filed within a reasonable period, then according to section 25, the arbitral tribunal can terminate the proceedings. The arbitral tribunal need not wait for a long time. They can terminate. This is one where the constitution of arbitral tribunal has happened. Assuming that the arbitration notice is given, section 9 applications filed, arbitrators yet to be appointed, and that party is not interested to even appoint the arbitrator, then the other party can approach the court which has granted the section 9 order by way of appeal under section 37. There is section 37 appealable orders wherein they can approach the court and inform the court that the parties have not, particularly the other party has not commenced the arbitration. In that way, they can get an injunction under section 9 itself.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your comment. If I may try to recapitulate what was mentioned is a party commencing an arbitration needs to, there should be a dispute, there should be issue of notice, receipt of notice. That is the point where there is a commencement, and then we go for the appointment under section 11. An arbitrator is appointed, then the claim statement is received, then there is a provision for filing the responses or the reply from the other side. There can be a counterclaim. Then again an opportunity is given to the claimant to make his response. Then the issues are raised. Then it will, based on the agreement, whether it is a document only, we go for a document only procedure. If there is, as you have suggested, that we should try to go for oral hearings, is a better course that is applicable, that can be followed. You have also mentioned that there is section 19 where the provisions of the CPC is not applicable, Evidence Act is not applicable, and you have also mentioned about oral hearing, and you have also mentioned about passing of the award. You have also mentioned about scenarios where the ex-party, the situations where the other party is not responding, and what is the method to be followed. And I think that it's a very comprehensive overview that has been given by a master in this field. And now I leave it to the other participants who wish to ask any questions, so that after that, I think that our time is also running out. We will conclude it, and because it's a very important day for Imba Vijayan sir also, because it is a Diwali occasion, and in his place it is really, really important, and also for us. So we will conclude within the time frame. Anybody wishes to ask any questions may do so, then thereafter we will conclude the session.
One more question. Something which I have already in the very beginning.
Yeah.
But can you please once more explain the difference between the civil court and the not civil court, civil judicial system, ADRC, system, common law.
Pardon, can you repeat the question? It's not clear.
In the you have you started your class that with point of difference between common law system and civil law system with regard to area. Can you please once again explain that?
Pardon me, Ransi Matthew. Your audio is not. You are not audible. Can you adjust your mic so that everyone can hear you?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's clear now.
Okay. The individual sir has started the with the point of difference between civil court system and common law system with regard to area. So can you hear me?
I think if I am correct, what I could hear, Mr. Matthew, is that initially I was sharing about the common law civil law system pertaining to ADR, whether arbitration is included. Yeah. Here, whatever process, whatever dispute resolution process happening outside court is generally categorized as alternative dispute resolution. And if it is going to be a process which is totally outside the court, we need not have a legislation for it. The process which is happening outside court has to be guided by only rules and regulations, not by law or an act. That is the objective of the civil law jurisdictions. In common law, I think many would accept that the common law principle, what has been taught, the law teachers, law academicians, what taught us, and the general principle is that we all depend on judicial precedent. It is not codified. Very simple, it's not codified. When it is going to be a codified system, then that system is going to be a civil law system. In that way, arbitration is not actually codified in total in most of the jurisdiction or the jurisdiction where it developed. That is the reason why in civil law jurisdiction, since all other laws are totally codified, whatever happening outside the court cannot be codified. In that perspective, arbitration is included in ADR. But in Indian perspective or many common law jurisdictions, it is codified to a reasonable level, and there is also judicial precedent to guide. In civil law system, arbitration awards also is not categorically taken for annulment by the courts. Only in this common law jurisdiction we can say the annulment of awards or the setting aside of an award is being taken by the court, and the enforcement also is being taken by the court. In civil law jurisdiction, when it comes to arbitration award, enforcement is not done by the court. They have enforcement authority. A good example, we can see a country called Vietnam. Vietnam is a civil law jurisdiction wherein once we get an award, that award is enforced not in the court, it is enforced by an enforcement authority. There is an authority, like we have some constitutional authorities. Likewise, for enforcing awards, authorities are there. In that perspective, it is nowhere touching the courts. That is the reason I, in my limited research, found that in civil law system, arbitration is included in ADR, and in common law system, it is not technically included in ADR.
Thank you, sir. Very much clear.
Good evening, sir. I'm Divya.
Yes.
So first of all, thank you so much for such a resourceful talk. So my concern is regarding there are any express limitation on the party autonomy in the Act, and also one more doubt is that whether we can add or we can restrict the powers of parties which is guaranteed by the Act. That is, in the arbitration agreement, what is the scope of restricting or limiting such autonomy which is already guaranteed by the Act itself?
Okay. Coming to the limitation of party autonomy or an authority given to the parties or guaranteed, according to Divya, it is guaranteed. I'm happy to hear that the law student is saying that the law is guaranteed a party autonomy. It is very clear. The entire party autonomy is given to the parties. No doubt, the parties, while structuring the initial document, that is the parent document, which is the arbitration agreement, if you can agree upon all the aspect given or guaranteed in the law, there is no limitation. It's very, very clear. The law can't limit the authority given or mandated by itself. The only limitation what personally comes or which has been guaranteed but still there is a limitation is the parties are appointing the arbitrator. The parties are appointing the arbitrator, but if the arbitrator's jurisdiction is under serious issue, then unfortunate thing is that the guarantee given to the party is being limited by way of the arbitral tribunal deciding it, and ultimately the arbitral tribunal, even without a proper jurisdiction, would continue and give the award. Most of the guaranteed principles of party autonomy is very, very clear, and there is no limitation to it.
Sir, whether we can restrict such, that is why I'm asking is that in all cases the parties may not be in equal footing. There can be dominating parties when it comes to arbitration. That is when we compare it between a corporate company or something. So if there is any scope for limiting their powers in the arbitration agreement, because when we observe the agreements, there can be arbitration clause after future disputes as well. There is a scope for that. So in such cases, if there is a scope for limiting such autonomy, if there is a room for misusing or bias, etc. That is my concern actually.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. Your concern is, I think the Supreme Court recently accepted your concern that if one party is a corporate and another is an individual who is not at par to face in that particular contract, the recent judgment, the Eastman Architects judgment versus HSCC, the party autonomy of giving one party being an appointing authority by way of the challenging a particular award has been tested, and there is a solution now. But when it comes to the arbitration agreement, drafting an arbitration agreement, to what extent we can bring it out in the clause? It is all about how we are negotiating the contract. The same way how we are negotiating the contract, we are also going to negotiate the arbitration or dispute resolution clause. Okay. As I just mentioned, there are various aspects of agreement which parties can mutually agree. One is appointment of arbitrator. Two is the seat, the place, the language. Likewise, they can agree, and there is high possibility of equal footing by both the parties. But example, I think you have taken an example of a corporate and individual. When it is a financial institution, one person is lending, another person is borrowing. There can't be any equal footage in that particular arbitration process. Here, the aspect of bias has to be brought down by the parties by way of invoking particularly the power given in section 12 and 13. Otherwise, there is no possibility of having an equal footing. The party autonomy might be misused when it comes to imbalancing authority of negotiating the contract itself.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
I have something to add with what Divya might be asking. That's what I understand. Insofar as contractual clauses are concerned, there is a provision in the English contract law where the court can visit the particular contract clause and verify whether it is a proper, I just don't remember the correct name, but unreasonable clauses can be interfered with by the courts. In India, especially in standard form contracts where multinational companies enters into contracts with consumers, and such contracts can be interfered. But in India, there were at least 2 occasions there is a law commission report on this. But the legislature has not interfered, and done anything, so that once you enter into a contract, you are bound by all the clauses, and the courts or tribunals are not entitled to interfere into the clauses which affects the consumers and people like that. I also wanted to apprise the participants that the concept of party autonomy is a particular concept where these are left to the
Excuse me, sir. Sir, your video is breaking.
discretion of the
I think Mr. Johnson got disconnected.
Yes, it seems to be the case.
Yeah, I'll just try to supplement what Mr. Johnson was mentioning about it. There is always a possibility of the parties to bring in the aspect of frustration or rescind of a contract. When they are trying to just bring in that particular argument, there is even a high possibility of relook on the arbitration clause. I think that was the thing Mr. Johnson wanted to mention. And he was mentioning about the English law of contract in that purview. Yes. Yeah, Johnson sir, now we can hear you. We can see you.
Yeah, I got a call and I had to go out.
Okay.
Now, the concept of party autonomy with reference to the national law, I think that we will be discussing this topic in a little more detail as to why this is being left to the parties, and what is the default mechanism that would apply when there is no consensus regarding certain matters which can be otherwise agreed upon. I think that Divya's concerns are more seriously relating to the standard form contracts that are being normally entered into, and the difficulties that consumers faces from the but our concept is basically the concept of party autonomy is just to assist the parties to take decisions in so far as appointment of arbitrators and determining the procedure for conduct of arbitrators, because this law respects something called your right to resolve your disputes also in the manner that you have agreed upon with the other party before the dispute. I think that this is the limited angle in which the party autonomy needs to be looked into. If there is any other questions, otherwise we can conclude the session, I think.
So can I ask one question? One last question. So if there is a foreign contract or foreign sale, if I am importing a product from a foreign company, from US, for example, and I have found it. I have found that they have violated the agreement, or I have found that they have violated the warranty, and would that lead to an arbitration procedure? What I am asking is, what is happening really what is happening in reality? That's my question. Is there a possibility of arbitration? Because I am asking this question because we were talking about standard form contract. That's why.
When it comes to, I think you are mentioning about an import transaction. When there are two parties and when they are entering into a full-fledged contract or just a purchase order, normally these export-import, in reality, they won't enter into detailed agreement or a contract. They'll just agree upon the payment terms, they'll agree upon the quantity, they'll agree upon the quality, and they'll just issue or they'll just sign a purchase order. Based on the purchase order, the entire transaction would happen. Even in the purchase order is considered to be a contract document. Even in that purchase contract or in the payment terms like LCs, letter of credits or documentary credits, there will be a standard dispute resolution clause. If the dispute resolution clause specifically mentioned about arbitration, it is very clear you can arbitrate. If it is mentioned generally about a country or a court, then you have option only to go to a court, whether it is going to be Indian court or the US court, depending upon what you have agreed. But there is no restriction. Even in the purchase order, even in the invoice, in international trade also, the volume or the amount involved would be huge, but still parties in reality sign a normal paper, a one-page invoice. Even in those invoice, nowadays the parties are including dispute resolution clause. But the thing is that whether they are going to agree to arbitrate or go to the courts, it depends upon the particular contract or the purchase order.
Okay, sir. But apart from importing and exporting, if I am buying a product online as an individual, and I am very less satisfied with the service or with the product, what's the solution?
Here, as Mr. Johnson was mentioning about the standard forms, here these are e-commerce contract. While you are entering into an e-commerce site, you are ordering through an e-commerce portal like Flipkart or whatever, Amazon. Initially, when you are registering, you will agree upon certain terms and conditions. I think many would miss as a what you can say as an offer given by the seller. You'll immediately download Amazon and just you'll put tick, agree, and then you'll submit. There ends. You are agreeing for a standard form of contract. Whatever terms and conditions, the covenants mentioned in that contract, you won't read. All of us, I am not blaming you. I also, if you agree in an Alibaba site, Alibaba site is a very very popular e-commerce site where you can purchase the best product at the cheapest price. If you just agree once, there ends. You are agreeing for that contract. You are a contracting party. When you are contracting party, you are agreeing for a specific terms and condition, which is standard. Then you can't just go back. It's a doctrine of estoppel. You can't just go back. You have to adhere to what is mentioned there. You can arbitrate, you can mediate, you can also enter into a court in any of those countries.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sir, good evening, sir. I'm having a doubt.
Actually, we are running out of time, so we'll be asking about the doubts relating to the section in the next section.
Okay.
Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you both of you, our speakers, for your valuable words. A special thank you to Veera Raghavan sir for sparing a few hours with us amidst of this Diwali celebration, and also to Johnson sir. Now that we have come to an end of our session, I now invite Ms. Aishwarya to deliver the vote of thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So we have reached the end of this beautiful session conducted by LGRF along with CIIA. Honorable Johnson Gomez sir, respected staff officer, and our most invited valued guest, Mr. Veera Raghavan Imbavijayan sir, and participants of LGRF members. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of LGRF organization, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the honorable delegates who blessed us with their presence and took out their valuable time of your busy schedules, I must mention our deepest sense of appreciation to Mr. Veera Raghavan, sir. A big thank you to sir. The way you explain the topic is exemplary, and thank you for your efforts towards arbitration process, a general overview. Thank you, sir. Further, we are grateful to Advocate Johnson Gomez, sir, Director of Institute of International Arbitration. Thank you so much, sir, for your findings and raising your works on arbitration and familiarizing it with us. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Mr. Safisa for your perfect logistics guidance and support. Thank you so much, sir, for your guidance. I also wish to express my gratitude towards our coordinating forces, Neelima ma'am and Advocate Sunita ma'am, for their enormous aid to cooperate this event so successful. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. No program can become success with a single person. So I extend my big thanks to our LJRF organization for their support and our volunteers too. Thank you guys for your contribution to this program. Once again, I want to state that we are all grateful to the speakers, Mr. Veera Raghavan, Imbavijayan sir, and Johnson Gomez sir. Thank you, sir. We thank you both for being with us this evening. It was grateful and pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya.
Thank you, Aishwarya.
Thanking you for all for your valuable participation in this webinar. And now we declare the webinar officially over. Wishing everyone a happy Diwali and a safe Diwali.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Uttara.